spooky friends, and welcome to another episode of the Scary-ish podcast.
Woo!
And I'm Robin Grace. This is Adam Diaz.
Hello.
And we're here to talk about some cool stuff.
Yeah, I am very excited this episode. I pulled this topic last week off of your list of future topics, actually. And
That's
I was
stealing.
Like, it is stealing, but I was like, I just want to see what this is about because I've never heard of it, and then I wound up not doing it, and then this week I was like, I absolutely have to do it. And to part the kimono a little bit, we're recording early, so yesterday was the live show. 3 days ago was our last episode, so it's just like, it's been a lot of scary-ish in a short amount of time, and I am still super excited to cover this topic. I am covering the Lake Nyos disaster. Robin, what are you going to be covering this week?
I am going to be covering the Westfield Watcher.
Right on. I'm excited because you have a lot more than I do, and I have a decent amount.
What's funny, I was kind of reluctant to do this because you had just done a Watchers.
The Dark Watchers.
Right.
Yeah.
So I was like, I don't want it to get confused with that, and it's totally different. Forewarning, completely other separate topic.
Cool. I was wondering, but I figured that you were going to clear it up. But before we jump into our topics, a quick reminder that we are doing a giveaway currently, and if you would like to enter to get a bunch of spooky stuff, some scary-ish merch, all you have to do is comment on our episodes, whether it be on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook when they go up, and then share the episode on your page. That way we can expand our audience.
Tag a friend in the comments, and that could be on Instagram. Share our post to your story and tag us in it, and just make sure you tag a friend in the comments.
Yeah, some of you folks have not missed an episode. Some of you are doing it on Instagram, some of you are doing it on Twitter, some on Facebook. We are tracking all of it. Each one is an entry, and we appreciate it so much. And if you're looking to hear homegrown horrors, they're going to be on the Storytime episodes that release every Friday. And Robin, what are homegrown horrors?
Homegrown horrors are the supernatural, paranormal, spiritual stories that you folks share with us, and they could be from yourself, experiences that you've personally experienced, stories from your family, your friends that they've experienced. We've had a lot from a whole bunch of different countries, and it is so cool.
Yeah, I was speaking with someone at work that's originally from the Philippines, and I was like, have you heard of Aswang? And she lit up, and she had so many stories, but she's currently traveling to the Philippines on Tuesday with another friend of ours that works there. And that person has never heard of it. So as we started to describe what an Aswang was, she's like, I'm going there in 4 days. I don't need to hear this shit. Tell me when I get back. And it's just you might need to know. It might save your life. And she was like, absolutely not. I don't want to hear it. And
you got to tell her the ridiculous ways to save yourself.
Right? And I tried to, but she just wasn't having any of it. But it's so amazing that we get to listen to these stories from all around the world from you folks, because we don't know these things until you tell us in so many different scenarios and situations. And it's fascinating to hear. So if you're looking to hear those are the Storytime episodes. And if you want to watch us record them, we do it Wednesday, 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So come hang out with us. But for now, we're doing our normal topic episode, and I get to go first this week.
Cool.
So I'm going to go ahead and jump right in. And this week, I knew I really wanted to cover an event. And it was inspired by the fact that I read about the Lake Nyos disaster last week. So I was like, this is super cool. I didn't go super in depth, but I knew it was going to be a great topic. So I didn't really want to do a cryptid or a ghost or a haunted house or a hotel again. I really wanted something a bit more substantial with a lot of scientific evidence that I could dig into. And I just decided that I was just going to go ahead and straight up steal it, because it's not speculative. It's something that just straight up happened. And it's just fascinating and terrifying all at once. So without further teasing, I give you the Lake Nyos disaster. And it is spelled N-Y-O-S, and I keep wanting to call it Nyos because my brain is dumb, but I've had it pronounced to me on the internet a bunch of times. It's Nyos. And for those of you who have never heard of it, let me give you some background. So there is this place in the world, and when I say world, I mean Earth, for those of you Martians and Venusians who are tuning in from your respective planets, people from Venus. So I know that because men are from Mars, women are from Venus, and they say, if you're from Venus, you speak Venusian.
What?
Yeah, you're welcome. So anyways, there's a place on Earth that is called Africa. And in Africa, there's this country called Cameroon. And it's in Central Africa. And you know how if you look at a map, how you see the continent of Africa and you see the continent of Southern America or South America?
Yeah.
And you can fit them together, and they just fit right into how one of them has that outcropping and the other one has that indent, and you can just slide them together.
Well, because the world used to be one whole thing.
Exactly. And if you were to slide South America into the puzzle piece that is Africa, that outcropping where they would connect and touch, that is Cameroon, right in the center there, but on the west coast of the continent.
Okay.
So that's where the country is located. And in the country of Cameroon is the lake named Lake Nyos. And today it looks different than it looked, say, when I was born. And for those of you who don't know, I'm old. And I was born in 1985. For anyone older than me, you're like, that's not old.
It's funny because I made fun of you for being old in front of my family the other day. And they're just like, no, he's just wise.
That's nice. They didn't say that out loud in a language I understood, though. So it's good to know that that's what was being said. I had a terrifying experience recently that actually went over really well. I met a lot of Robin's family that I hadn't met before, and they were all very nice. They had a lot of questions for me, so I was kind of nervous, but it went over really well. And there was a lot of Vietnamese being spoken. I was just like, I have no idea what they're saying, but I hope it's going well.
That's why you need to learn.
I asked Robin to teach me Vietnamese like a month after I met her, and she was like, no, I'm not teaching you shit.
Hiring Vietnamese tutor.
Yeah, please, for cereal. Anyways, I'm going to get back to this. I was born in 1985, and Lake Nyos looked very different in 1985. And Lake Nyos then was a rich, beautiful blue. Like, do you remember the movie Joe Dirt? I don't know how many of you folks have seen that. I've seen it.
It's
I
such a good
absolutely
movie.
love that movie. Like, he went to Silvertown and he talked about how it was like a city out of a postcard. And it's like this beautiful thing. Like, picture a lake that would be on a postcard. Like that beautiful, rich blue that like reflects the sky. And even on a cloudy day, it still seems like it's really, really pretty. Like, if you're having trouble picturing that, let me use my mouth words to try and paint you a head movie, okay? So, it's not a giant lake. It's actually fairly small, but it's not that bad. It's over a mile long and just under a mile wide. So about a mile by a mile. And at its deepest, it runs around 700 feet deep. So it's still pretty deep. It's not like a wimpy lake by any means. And it has that beautiful blue water, and the banks around it are a mixture of like flat shores that seem like beaches, and trees and foliage, and also cliff faces. And the area itself is rocky, but it's also green, so it's very, very pretty. It's like a lake you can imagine jumping off like the side of a not-so-steep cliff and then plunging into the beautiful blue water below.
All right.
Like, not exactly the scene from Forgetting Sarah Marshall, because that water is perfectly clear, but like really rich blue, but still very similar. So if you have trouble still picturing this because your head projector isn't giving you a good image, just head to our Instagram, because I'm going to put up pictures
cool.
of it.
All right.
And what it used to look like.
Oh, so it's not pretty anymore.
We'll get to it. And the area surrounding Lake Nyos isn't heavily populated, but there are multiple villages around it. And the lake is actually, geographically speaking, much higher than those villages. And there is a slope on nearly all sides of the lake that leads down to where these villages are. And the villages are fairly simple. They don't live in traditional houses like we would picture from a first world country, but most are made of brick. They're fairly small, and they're quaint, and they have bricks for walls. They have like a thatch roof or some sort of straw or some sort of foliage that serves to like keep the rain and the weather out, you know? So you can get a pretty good picture of what that looks like in your mind.
It's really hard not to make a bless the rains down in Africa joke.
I'm hoping so much that you don't, but there's something about rain a little bit later, and you probably won't want to make that joke.
Oh,
then.
no, okay.
So, okay, you can picture these villages. They're fairly simple life. They're mostly farmers raising cattle, and one interesting thing about this location is it's about 100 miles away from the Pacific Ocean. So it's really, really not that far.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And at the ocean, like if you were to just go in a straight line, there's a chain of islands. And those islands are called the Cameroon Line. And Lake Nyos is actually directly in line with these islands that run into the ocean.
Wow.
And the line is actually called that because it runs along what is known to be a chain of volcanoes. And Lake Nyos is what is known as a crater lake, which basically means it is a lake that fills an extinct caldera of a volcano.
Okay.
So it sits in what used to be the mouth of an active volcano. That said, don't worry, the volcano is extinct. And that's not to say like it didn't rock and roll back in the day and just spew a bunch of lava, because part of the lake itself is actually held back by a natural dam made of volcanic rock. And this wall of volcanic rock is 130 feet high and 150 feet wide. And even though the volcano is extinct, there is still liquid hot magma beneath it.
Liquid hot magma.
So that's what we're looking at. At least that's what we were looking at back in 1985. But as you can guess, it did not stay that way. And something happened actually on August 21st, 1986. We actually just passed the 33-year anniversary of this event known as the Lake Nyos disaster. And we're going to jump ahead, actually, not to August 21st. We're going to go to August 22nd and 23rd. So the days that followed what happened, so you can get an idea of how this was discovered at the time by the folks who found it. Visitors and locals that were returning from various errands all around the lake were met with a very odd sight the closer they approached their villages. And as they entered town, they noticed that some of the cattle were just laying on the ground, like taking a little nippy nap, like they were just tired, which seemed pretty odd, you know? And as they continued, they noticed more of the cattle napping, let's say. In fact, all the cattle they kept seeing were napping. And then they started seeing people, and these people were all also on the ground, eyes closed, not moving. And they realized something was very, very wrong. And they started to try and wake people up and ask them what the hell happened, and only a few of them were actually waking up. The story that those folks told was bizarre. They were just having a normal day, going about their typical day-to-day activities. It was nighttime, people were starting to go home, and most folks were falling asleep, and then people just started collapsing. And just as quickly as they noticed other folks falling down or collapsing, their vision started to go dark, and then they were just down themselves, and they were out. And it happened all around the lake, not just in one spot, not just confined to one village. And there was no ash, there was no lava, there was no seismic activity reported by any of these folks that were waking up, and there was no seismic activity recorded nearby at all. And folks went up to the lake to see if anything looked different up there, and it really, really did. The beautiful, picturesque blue water was no longer blue.
Wow.
In a couple of days, it had gone from blue to a dark brown/red. And not just like mud or dirty water, there were like tinges of basically what looked like rust. Like this entire lake had turned to a completely different shade and somehow like oxidized and had this rust in it. And they had no idea what happened. But one of the folks that actually woke up had quite the tale to tell. So at this point, I'd like you to just disregard this picture of this simple life that these folks led and picture literally anywhere. Like it could be where you're at right now, whether you're in your car or your office or your house, your apartment or whatever. Picture where you live maybe. And imagine that this is what happened to you. And this is the story of what happened around 9 p.m. on Thursday, August 21st, 1986. This is from someone who woke up. They said, "I could not speak. I became unconscious. I could not open my mouth because then I smelled something terrible.
Oh, wow.
I heard my daughter snoring in a terrible way, very, very abnormal. When crossing to my daughter's bed, I collapsed and fell. I was there till 9 o'clock in the morning." So they basically were unconscious for 12 hours. So they were going to check on their daughter, and then they were rendered unconscious by whatever was happening. They continue to say, "Until a friend of mine came and knocked at my door. I was surprised to see that my trousers were red, had some stains like honey. I saw some starchy mess on my body. My arms had some wounds. I didn't really know how they got there. I opened the door. I wanted to speak, but my breath would not come out. My daughter was already dead. I went to my daughter's bed thinking she was still sleeping. I lay down and slept till it was 4:30 p.m. in the afternoon on Friday." So this guy finds his daughter dead and then just lays down next to her and just
because he doesn't realize
just
it.
passes out again. He like has nothing that he can do because this is still affecting him, you know? Then I managed to go over to my neighbors' houses. They were all dead. I decided to leave because most of my family was in Wum. Wum is a nearby village that's a little bit further away from the lake. I got my motorcycle. A friend whose father had died left with me for Wum. As I rode through Nyos, and Nyos is the name of the town he was in, named after the lake, I didn't see any sign of any living thing. When I got to Wum, I was unable to walk or even talk. My body was completely weak."
Wow.
So this is one of the people who survived, who just woke up, still having absolutely no idea what happened, why their body's covered in these weird lesions, and their clothes are covered in rust, and their body also has like a weird sticky film on it, and basically everyone that they knew is dead, including his daughter, except for like one person and one friend who made it. And this is the story of a survivor because far too many folks didn't have stories like this. There's so many people that they're simply gone, like alive and fine 1 minute, and then the next minute their vision just started going dark, they fell to the ground, and they never got up again. And the whole world noticed. When this was discovered, everyone paid attention to it because it was this bizarre event that no one seemed to have an answer for, but there were a lot of theories. And plenty of people traveled to Cameroon to try and figure out what had happened and the scale of the damage. And like I said, this was 33 years ago. So the gift of hindsight means we know what happened now, kind of, for the most part.
We have a whole bunch of technology and things like that.
So that magma chamber that still exists under the lake, it didn't erupt or anything, but it was seeping all the time into the lake. And it's not just spewing out lava. What it was spewing out was gas, carbon dioxide to be exact. And this is 100% confirmed. It's actually still the case at this lake. And on that Thursday morning, 33 years ago, there was some sort of event that caused the lake to shift. The most likely thing based off of what happened was a landslide of some sort, which might have been triggered by an earthquake. But even that is called into question because there was no seismic event reported by any of the survivors. There was no shaking. They didn't notice anything. And there was nothing recorded on any of the seismographs in the local area that should have picked it up.
Yeah.
So they're like, this is the most likely thing, but it's also probably not the case because there's absolutely no evidence of it, despite the disaster that followed. The other thing they thought it could have been was some sort of sudden catastrophic rain localized to the lake. So I guess that doesn't, bless the rains down in Africa.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it was blessed by demons.
Yeah, so that's not exactly blessed. That's cursed. But even that they don't think happened because there was no reports of sudden and severe rainfall. But whatever the event was, something caused a massive shift in the water of the lake. So imagine that mile by mile wide lake that's 700 feet deep, and it's just been sitting. And the water that's been sitting at the bottom of this lake all of a sudden churns for some reason in its entirety. And it's like if you have a glass of water and you shake it up trying to get all the water off the bottom of your glass to the top. And essentially something made that happen. And no one's exactly sure what it was.
Well, could it have been gas bubbles and like a whole bunch of bubbles and like coming to the top? And
there would have been seismic activity showing that so much gas was coming through aside from what normally came through. But what did happen was the massive amount of water churned, essentially. And the carbon dioxide that was at the bottom of this lake that had slowly been leaking out was kept at the bottom of the lake by the pressure of the water because it was so deep. And so that water was just heavily saturated with carbon dioxide, and it basically just sat at the bottom of the lake. When it churned like that, all of the water at the bottom of the lake suddenly rushed upwards and met like the top layer of the lake, which is much, much less dense with far less pressure. Now, when that happened, the carbon dioxide no longer had anything to hold it in the water and under the lake, and it's unknown what the exact volume of carbon dioxide was that was released. The conservative estimate that I found from the time when they studied it was around 100,000 to 300,000 tons of carbon dioxide escaped the lake, just like in a moment.
It's a ton of gas.
Yeah, it's super gassy. And a study done in 2018 by Scientific American now puts the estimate of carbon dioxide amount released closer to 1.6 million tons of carbon dioxide just suddenly erupting from this lake.
Wow.
That had basically just been sitting at the bottom of it. It's not like there was some massive eruption. It was just waiting to get out. Like, it was literally just sitting at the bottom of the lake, which is like unheard of even in 1986. Like, no one knew something like this could happen. The gas erupted literally from the surface of the lake.
Did the water come out of the lake at all? Or?
Yeah, and it's about to get really intense. Despite being relatively invisible like gas is, I think like it must have been this sight to see because we've all seen like some form of gas like escaping into the air, whether it be like propane or propane accessories.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Or something. So it seems like thicker and like wavy.
Right.
It's kind of the same effect you get with like heat wave where you see it on the roads where it just looks different. What song are you about to sing?
Heat wave.
Okay, I can do that. That's pretty good. So we've all seen something that looks like that. Now imagine if you would have been standing on the shores of Lake Nyos that day. What you would have seen is the water of the lake shift, like basically something was at the bottom of the lake about to stand up. It literally would have looked like some giant creature was about to get up because the water is just churning and churning. And you have no idea what's triggered it or what the hell is going on.
What if it was a large gaseous creature that came out?
So you think this gas was sentient and it just wanted to escape?
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's like a gas sprite, an air sprite, those things exist.
I can't confirm or deny that, I suppose, but let me tell you what else you would have seen. So an area of the lake would have started to froth because all this gas was starting to be released after you saw the massive shift in the water basically being shaken up. And that area that was frothing would suddenly start rising in a column as the gas escaped. So it's not just like the water splitting and bubbling a little bit and all the gas spewing into the sky, it's 300 tons of gas. So as it's coming up, it's bringing the water up with it. So this geyser essentially would be spewing out of the lake at around 60 miles per hour, launching over 330 feet into the sky.
That's insane.
And this would just keep going until all of this gas would escape. The water displacement itself triggered a wave over 80 feet tall that rushed to the shores of Lake Nyos that would just basically batter the shores, leveling trees and foliage before receding back into the lake and dragging all that displaced greenery back into it.
Did people swim at this lake? It was like a...
They used to.
Okay.
They don't anymore. So the gas just poured into the air, emptying out this massive pocket, and it's truly hard to fathom how much 300,000 tons of carbon dioxide would really be. We're going to do a little bit of scaling at the end of this that is fascinating and terrifying, so hang on for that part. But basically, all this CO2 shoots into the air. And as most of you, I'm sure, know, CO2 is denser, which means it's heavier than the air we breathe. So even though it's shooting up into the air, it's coming back down. It's basically falling back down, and it's a gas, so you wouldn't really see it. But because it's a gas, it basically just tumbles down to the landscape, hugging the ground and sweeping along with the slope of the ground.
All right.
So it's falling off the lake, basically. Shot all this gas into the air, it collapses down onto the lake, and then it just starts basically running towards the villages.
I'm just imagining dry ice, and when you're pouring stuff onto dry ice, and then it just fans all of that smoke out.
And just clings to the ground.
Yeah.
Imagine if it was invisible and there was 300,000 tons of it.
It's insane, dude.
So, mercifully, most of the folks in the nearby villages were asleep by this time. 4 villages in particular were affected the most. Nyos, like I had mentioned, that was the survivor story. Kam, K-A-M, Cha, C-H-A, and Subum. I think I'm saying that right, S-U-B-U-M. And they said the smell of the cloud was horrendous. It was very much a mystery at the time and still kind of is. They know it was carbon dioxide beyond the shadow of a doubt, but what they don't know is what other gases were mixed into it. They think that sulfur dioxide and hydrogen sulfide were also released, and it would explain why so many of the survivors seem to suffer lesions and almost like forms of burning. And some of the side effects for some of the survivors that we're going to get to in a little bit.
They can't test their blood or anything?
There's just some things that, like, after the fact, like, you're not sure what they inhaled. You just know it was a poisonous gas. And because you know that they inhaled so much carbon dioxide and we're just directly exposed to a wave of it flowing over them, it's like this is kind of consistent with some of the exposure we know about, but it also fits the patterns of these 2 other gases. So, all in all, 3,000 cattle and 1,746 people died.
That is so many people.
Basically in an instant. Just gone. And no one knew what happened. And folks were affected even further out than that.
So how do people survive?
Basically, they, for whatever reason, the exposure wasn't enough to suffocate them to death. They managed to breathe, like, through being buried under this gas cloud. And other folks just suffocated and died in it. Like, first you pass out because the carbon dioxide just doesn't allow you to breathe, so it'd be like holding your breath until you passed out. And then while being passed out, just having barely enough air to stay alive while all the other people didn't. And it's like drowning without being underwater.
That
it's
is
terrifying.
So, yeah.
Drowning is one of the things I'm most terrified of. So when I was, like, reading this, like, I was getting kind of teary-eyed. Like, I cannot imagine this.
Just anxiety.
I can't imagine going and checking on my daughter while trying to struggle through and stay alive. And, like, passing out for, like, half a day at a time and knowing, like, I need to get out of here, but that's my daughter. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
It's just so horrible to think of. And it happened to 1,746 people, not to mention all the folks that they knew who survived. And folks were affected even further out. And on the outskirts of the affected zone, they had around 4,000 people basically flee the area. And survivors and those in close proximity when this happened wound up developing respiratory problems, lesions on their body, and even paralysis as a side effect of exposure. So,
because you're cutting off oxygen to your brain and things like that. Oh,
it's
man.
it's so scary. And since this happened, scientists all over the world have decided they needed to investigate lakes pretty much everywhere to see if there is, like, super saturated water at the bottom of the lakes with this amount of CO2 in it. Because if there is, this could literally happen anywhere. Literally anywhere. So they started investigating all the lakes once they determined that this is what happened. And what's fascinating, and we're about to get into some scale here, And it's pretty scary. And it's also like one of my favorite things to do is to just say like, this is what compares to this. So don't be freaked out by these numbers. Just stick with me here, all right? Lake Nyos is one of only 3 lakes on the planet that has this happen. It is naturally occurring, but it is one of the rarest things that you will ever find. And the 3 in the world are Lake Nyos, Lake Maunoon, which is also in Cameroon and super close to Lake Nyos. And Lake Maunoon is roughly the same size as Lake Nyos. And in 1984, 37 people died on the banks of Lake Maunoon. Terrorism was suspected because they had no idea what happened. They thought it was some sort of biological weapon.
Was the lake different colored then?
The lake was different colored. There had been a tsunami larger than the one on Lake Nyos. It had turned to rust colored. And on top of that, the people died of suffocation from CO2. And people were baffled when it happened, but it was so like small. It was such a smaller number of people. Not everyone got involved to investigate it. But the leading thing that they thought did it was terrorism. They thought someone was testing out some sort of new agent. And they had no idea what happened.
That is crazy.
So they were super, super terrified when this went down.
Does the water turn back to its...
Eventually, it will fade back to blue, and it's sort of starting to get there. But I saw a picture as recent as 2 years ago, and it's still just that hideous brown color.
Okay.
So the foliage has grown back, and the trees are starting to grow back significantly. But like the lake itself does not look like it used to look. And if you look at our Instagram, you will see the comparison between the two, along with a diagram that shows like how the gas would have risen and then fallen down and then just run across the countryside, basically. So that said, after they realized this was happening, in 2003, they installed a venting pipe into Lake Nyos, which is fascinating technology. It's basically a pipe that runs to the bottom of the lake and slowly brings up a small amount of oversaturated water containing so much carbon dioxide. Once it gets to a certain point of elevation where they don't have to lift it manually anymore, it's naturally occurring and it just flows to the top itself and vents naturally. And because Lake Nyos is like 1 mile by 1 mile, the vent pretty much takes care of it. I don't know if they've installed a venting pipe on Lake Maunoon or not, but they need to, because it sounds like something that would be super important to have in case this ever happened again. Now here's the scary part. The third lake in the world that this happens is called Lake Kivu, Kivu. It is not in Cameroon, so they don't have all 3 of like the super deadly erupting lakes. It is on the border of the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda, so it's still in Africa.
Okay.
There is a vent that actually captures the gas in an effort to have a form of energy that they can use. So they've taken this idea of putting a vent in there and are trying to capture some of the naturally occurring gas and store it and eventually use it kind of how we use natural gas like in the United States.
Okay.
In different
but we use
various
like
forms.
methane and stuff.
Exactly. So there is also methane in Lake Kivu. And we're about to get to some numbers that are pretty significant. The problem with having this vent on Lake Kivu is there's simply not enough of them. Lake Kivu is 2,000 times bigger than Lake Nyos.
That's it's gigantic.
It erupts roughly every 1,000 years, and shocker, it is overdue for an eruption significantly. And scientists are saying that this is going to happen very soon unless measures are taken to degas it in an increased fashion. It's just unavoidable. It's going to happen. Like, that's just the nature of it, and people aren't taking it seriously because there's only 3 in the world. 2 of them went off in the 80s. This one's been waiting for over 1,000 years to go off, and it's overdue. And they're like, this is going to happen, man. The only reason people aren't trying to do this is because they haven't figured out a way to make money off of it yet.
Okay. But I feel like it's something that the government should invest in.
What government? The Republic of Congo or Rwanda? Because they don't give a fuck.
What?
They don't care. They don't care about it at all. Like, it's not a concern to them. They don't think that they're going to strike rich and somehow like develop this crazy new technology off of this. Like,
what about the UN?
I mean, the UN might be able to do it, but they still have to be allowed into the countries to do something like this. And if they were to try and make the case like this needs to be done, they'd have to convince these folks that they need to be let onto their land, onto this lake that they split, so that they could install this technology and then figure out who's going to profit from it because it's already on their land. And it's not the most diplomatic area in the world, Rwanda and the Republic of Congo, obviously. So scientists are very, very worried about this. And you might think, how bad could the eruption be then if it's 2,000 times bigger? Does it scale? Well, not exactly. Lake Nyos eruption had its cloud of gas spread out over a radius of 16 miles. So if you take Lake Nyos and put it in the center and you draw 16 miles in any direction, that's where they would have been affected, and that's where all these folks would have collapsed and died mostly. It released, according to the largest number, like I mentioned, 1.6 million tons of gas, which is a lot. So Lake Kaivu has more. Much, much, much more. And this is how I'm going to do this for you. Picture the lake from the beginning, before it erupted. It had around 1,200 cubic meters of gas at the bottom of it.
Oh, okay.
So when you think cubic meter, what does it really mean? The best way I can compare this to is if you ever shopped around for a house or an apartment, you judge a house, at least here in the States, by square footage, you know?
Right.
If you're anywhere else, it's usually square meters. So, because we're just weird and we use feet for whatever reason.
There's got to be another country that uses feet, though, right?
There's like two. There's two other ones. I can't remember what they are. But, okay, let's picture what a square meter is, okay? We're talking square now. So you just put down tape on the ground, and it's 3 feet by 3 feet. Imagine that square on the ground. If you have a cat, the cat would probably go sit in it because cats are weird like that. So 3 feet.
I want to test that out. I don't think Arya would do it.
3 feet by 3 feet on the ground, okay? Then act like it just randomly inflates and rises 3 feet. So now it's not just length by width, it's depth as well, you know? And you have your cube sitting in front of you. Think of a 3-foot box, essentially, that something would ship in that you could just set on the ground in front of you. And that is what a cubic meter is. Now, Lake Nyos had 1,200 of those at the bottom filled with deadly gas that's incredibly dense. And it might have had more than that. So imagine 1,200 of those cubes at the bottom of Lake Nyos, right? And if we want to scale it, maybe even 6,000 of those cubes existed at the bottom of Lake Nyos, 100% filled with poison gas. All right? Now let's talk about Lake Kaivu. Take that same cube, put it at the bottom of Lake Kaivu, and put it next to all the others, and it would total 300 billion, with a B, billion cubic meters are at the bottom of Lake Kaivu. Not to mention another 60 billion, with a B, cubic meters of methane, which is what they're really after with that vent. They want the methane. It is so much larger on a scale that's unfathomable. It's not just 2,000 times bigger. It's exponentially bigger. It's a number that is hard to really picture in your mind's eye. But if this eruption were to take place, it would literally be one of the most devastating events in recent human history, possibly all of human history. Like, not even a joke, not over-exaggerating it. And to give you the idea of the numbers of people we're talking now, Cameroon in 1986 had a population of around 10 million people. Today, Rwanda has around 12 million people. So Rwanda is relatable in terms of like population density to what happened back then, except this eruption will be significantly larger, like thousands upon thousands of times larger. The Republic of Congo shocked the shit out of me. Republic of Congo has 82 million people living there.
Wow.
That is roughly 1/4 the size of the United States as far as population goes. Population of the United States is around 330 to 340 million people. So imagine 1/4 of the people from this country put into an area of land that is 29 times smaller than it. And that is the Republic of Congo. And it literally on its border has this lake that is a disaster just waiting to happen. That is the scale of disaster we're talking about with Lake Kaivu, which is a ticking time bomb. And the story of Lake Nyos is really just a cautionary tale of what is going to happen at some point. And I can't even calculate the number of how far out this will reach based off of like elevation and just sheer volume of poison gas that will be released. All you'll know is if you're not from there, you'll find out on the news that hundreds of thousands, possibly millions of people have collapsed and died, and no one knows what the hell happened. So this is kind of more scary than scary-ish.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of numbers, but when you really try and wrap your head around them, it is kind of terrifying. So that, my friends, is the story of the disaster of Lake Nyos.
Cool. Thank you. That's frightening.
Yeah, it is.
So thank you for that dreary bit of future murder of a whole bunch of people.
You're welcome. I hope you enjoyed that.
I am going to get into a not so scary topic. I am going to cover the Westfield Watcher, and it's something that's strange, and it's still an unsolved mystery of sorts. And I think it's a pretty popular topic of discussion on internet forums and news articles, things like that. And it's fairly recent. It's really recent, actually. Like way, way, way more recent than your event, even
That
though
only happened 33 years ago?
yes. And I mean, it is going to happen in the future, so hopefully not.
I probably
anytime
won't be
soon,
visiting Republic of Congo or Rwanda anytime soon because of it, but let me find out what I'm afraid of with
all
you.
right. So the setting is Westfield, New Jersey, and the start is June 2014.
Okay.
So really recent.
Let me get out my calculator. That was like 15 years ago.
So that's only 5 years ago. And the story is of the Broaddus family of 5. So it was the parents and 3 kids. And they purchased their dream home in, from what I've read, it seems to be a pretty sought out neighborhood or street because it's called the Boulevard. But
Are all streets called the Boulevard sought out?
it's a big 6-bedroom house at 657 Boulevard. And I'm saying that because it's all over newspaper articles. You can literally look up the Zillow listing, like the real estate listing for this house.
Did you look it up?
So yeah, I did.
Do you have property values in here?
Basic, small things.
Okay. It's
All
like
the
you're one of
small
the Property
things.
Brothers right now, which has me super excited.
Okay. Unfortunately for the family, they didn't even get to move in before they began receiving anonymous and menacing letters. And these letters included disturbing details as if someone were watching them. I've been watching a lot of Criminal Minds lately, so
Yeah,
it kinda
you really
freaks me
have.
out.
It's been on the TV pretty much nonstop.
Yeah. Days after closing the deal on the house, Derek Broaddus was spending a day repainting rooms in the house. And when he was done, he decided to go check the mailbox outside. And among the usual mail was a plain white envelope addressed to the new owner of the home. And I guess when you find that, you see it all the time when you first move into a home and people are sending you ads and things like that.
Right.
And
Like, here's a service that the previous owner had. Would you like to carry it over?
right. Inside this envelope was a letter that just seemed disconcerting. There were things that were just really odd. So I'm going to be reading these letters as I go through it, okay?
Oh, God.
So the letter went like this, quote, 657 Boulevard has been the subject of my family for decades now. As it approaches its 110th birthday, I've been put in charge of watching and waiting for its second coming. My grandfather watched the house in the 1920s, and my father watched in the 1960s. It is now my time. Do you know the history of the house? Do you know what lies within the walls of 657 Boulevard? Why are you here? I will find out. End quote.
Jesus. I would be so mad if someone sent me that letter after I got my new house. Like, I'm not ripping the walls apart to see what the hell this person's talking about because it could be a prank, but I would really, really want to.
What's worse is what they spent on the house.
Oh, no. Here we go.
$1.3 million.
Wow.
They spent over $1 million, and they just bought the house, and then they get this weird letter.
Immediately they start getting creeped on.
So Derek and Maria Broaddus weren't exactly sure what to think of the letter. I mean, they just bought this house, they want to move in, this is their dream home, and then they get this weird letter. So they tried to brush it off, only for more letters to eventually arrive. And each was signed in the script, The Watcher. Derek contacted the previous owners of the home, John and Andrea Woods, in attempts to kind of understand the letters and figure out why it was that they were getting them. And after reading, he wanted to know if they knew about the letters. He contacted Andrea about it. And there's a letter in that they get later on, but it says like, I asked the Woods to bring me young blood and it looks like they listened. So he contacts her and she replies like, during the 23 years we lived there, we didn't have anything happen. But a couple days before the sale, they got a letter. But the Woods simply assumed that it was a prank, and so they just threw it away.
Do we know what their letter said?
No.
Oh,
No.
God.
So the Broadduses, they went to the local police department, and they were advised by a detective, Leonard Lugo, to keep the letters a secret, as every neighbor was a suspect, which is normal. I mean, who else would be sending them letters like that, you know?
Someone that lived nearby.
So Derek canceled all his work trips to stay home. Maria kept a short leash on her children. And she would just freak out whenever any of her children was out of her view. So she'd like call after them like she was scolding them. But they wanted to still be outside, showing that they were there, doing stuff. And they still tried to interact with their neighbors. They were trying not to let anyone in on what they were dealing with because they didn't want to give anyone an inkling, that we're onto you or something. Derek would
would say that went poorly since we're talking about it right now.
Derek would even invite people, like neighbors, to come inspect his home renovations because they were working on the house, painting rooms, doing stuff. And he'd invite people over, check it out, say, what do you think? One day, one of their contractors noted that a sign that he'd erected one night had been ripped out the next day. So someone's been around,
What kind of sign was it?
It's probably like some construction sign of some sort. Maybe a sign advertising the contractor or something like that. Who knows? I don't know. It didn't say on the internet. But the next letter that came only a month later was addressed to them by name. And the spellings of their names were incorrect. So it could have just been someone overhearing conversations or things like that. And just did the best they could at putting their names together. Because Broadus is a pretty hard name to spell.
I don't know how to spell it.
I don't even know if I'm saying it right, but that's what it looks like to me.
Okay.
So, the letter mentioned...
Are you the watcher? I think we figured it out, folks.
Shut up.
I have discovered the secret identity.
The letter mentioned numerous details about the family and the home. And this one's a lot longer, okay? So, strap in. Quote, 657 Boulevard is anxious for you to move in. It's been years and years since the young blood ruled the hallways of the house. Have you found all of the secrets it holds yet? Will the young blood play in the basement, or are they too afraid to go down there alone? I would be very afraid if I were them. It's far away from the rest of the house. If you were upstairs, you'd never hear them scream.
Wow.
Will they sleep in the attic, or will you all sleep on the second floor? Who has the bedrooms facing the street? I'll know as soon as you move in. It'll help me to know who's in which bedroom. Then I can plan better. All of the windows and doors in 657 Boulevard allow me to watch you and track you as you move through the house. Who am I? I'm the watcher and have been in control of 657 Boulevard for the better part of 2 decades now. The Woods family turned it over to you. It was their time to move on and kindly sold it when I asked them to. I pass by many times a day. 657 Boulevard is my job, my life, my obsession. And now you are too, Broadus family. Welcome to the product of your greed. Greed is what brought the past 3 families to 657 Boulevard, and now it's brought you to me. Have a happy moving in day. You know I'll be watching.
I just Airbnb it at this point. Like, it's totally not worth it.
They lived in another house. So this whole time...
Lucky for them, they bought a house for $1.3 million, and they're like, let's just stay in our other house.
So this letter mentioned the Woods, which is why Derek was like, we need to go talk to them and figure out what's going on, because this is really freaking weird. They were understandably suspicious of who it could be that was sending these letters. Derek was suspicious of their immediate neighbors, the Langfords. They'd lived there since the 1960s, and it was a 90-year-old woman living with several of her children, which were all at least 60 years old. Derek was specifically suspicious of Michael, which was one of the youngest, and unemployed. And a note that they add in too is he was bearded.
He was bearded?
Who cares? Beards are hip.
Bearded and unemployed. Clearly,
Beards
he's a suspicious person.
They're in. They're hip right now, okay? I'm hip. I'm with it. Detective Lugo interviewed Michael, but couldn't book him on anything without any possible evidence, because Michael was just like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I didn't do it. And they can't be like, well, you're under arrest anyway, because all they have is this letter. There's no evidence connecting the two.
Like, don't lie to me. You have a beard.
Oh my God. There's more letters under that beard, isn't there?
Shake the beard out right now.
Even Andrea Woods herself tried to give some insight on how the letters must have come from someone local to the area. The letters were delivered through the U.S. Postal Service Center in Kearney. That Postal Service Center in Kearney was the local distribution center, so all the mail went through there. And the first letter was postmarked before the house was actually put on the market. The Woods never put up a for sale sign. They never gave hints to the fact that they were selling, so it didn't make any sense that this letter was sent before the sale of the house. So investigators and the people involved were even considering that the culprit was someone that was just a losing house bidder. Like, they wanted to buy the house and they couldn't buy it.
That's what I thought first, too, until you just said that they sent the first letter before the house was even on the market.
Right. But they that was just one of their ideas, that it could have been someone with a grudge. The Woods had multiple offers on the place when they placed it on the market, and the Broaddus family was just the one that won out. And after the letter about the young blood, the children, the Broadduses decided to stop bringing the kids around the house, which is totally understandable because that's super creepy. If you go in the basement, it's so far away from the rest of the house.
They won't even hear you scream.
Yeah, how creepy is that? And so this next letter comes in when they stop bringing the kids around, right? Quote, 657 Boulevard is turning on me. It's coming after me. I don't understand why. What spell did you cast on it? It used to be my friend, and now it is my enemy. I'm in charge of 657 Boulevard. It is not in charge of me. I will fend off its bad things and wait for it to become good again. It will not punish me. I will rise again. I will be patient and wait for this to pass and for you to bring the young blood back to me. 657 Boulevard needs young blood. It needs you. Come back. Let the young blood play again like I once did. Let the young blood sleep in 657 Boulevard. Stop changing it and let it alone.
So creepy.
It's so creepy.
If it's a prank, it's really fucking funny to the people who did it and no one else.
It's okay.
And that's just a shitty prank. Like you have
It's
to
a
sooner or
horrible
later
prank.
you have to sooner or later say like this is a joke so that everyone can be like, oh, ha, ha,
Because it's
ha."
affecting their lives.
Yeah, it's destroying their possibility of living in their dream home. And unless you're like really malicious about it, like playing this sort of a prank or like setting this sort of a thing up, is just such a fucking dick move.
At some point, they had to sell the house that they were living in and move in with family because they couldn't afford it. They couldn't afford to pay for 2 houses. Oh man, whoever did this sucks. It's just all incredibly disconcerting. These letters are so strange and scary. Someone was watching their actions and everything that they did. They were watching their home and their children. It's just weird. Derek and Maria set up webcams and stakeouts in attempts to catch whoever it was, and they even hired investigators, but they weren't able to find anything. Maybe a few strange things popped up about their neighbors, like 2 of them were registered sex offenders, and another household had a habit of placing a pair of lawn chairs facing the Broaddus' garden.
That's creepy.
That's creepy. And despite this, there weren't really any clues as to who it could be. They have all these weird things and some connections and some suspects, but they can't be like, he did it, you know?
I wouldn't know what to do. All I know is I've kind of been in a D&D mindset lately, so like my D&D barbarian character mindset is burn the whole place down. Not the house. Keep your house. Burn all the neighbors' houses down. Then you'll know.
So this part kind of made me chuckle a little bit because while I was researching, I was watching Criminal Minds. But Derek also got in touch with a former FBI agent named Robert Linehan, who gave him a possible profile based on all the evidence that was provided. After like watching 6 seasons in the span of like 2 weeks, I was just like, oh my gosh, yes, a profile.
Deliver the profile.
His profile went something like this. The person must be well-read. Because there was a lack of vulgar and crass language, it meant it wasn't a big macho man type person. And he also wondered if the watcher was inspired by the Keanu Reeves movie of the same name. So in case you haven't seen it, The Watcher with Keanu Reeves is
if you slow down, this bus will explode.
That's like my favorite Keanu Reeves movie.
That's The Watcher, right? Because you're watching the speed the whole time. Oh, wait, never mind. I just figured it out.
So The Watcher is about a retired FBI agent that is stalked and taunted by a serial killer. I've never seen it. I'm very curious after having...
when did it come out and who else was in it?
I don't know. I couldn't tell you. I didn't look up that part. Are you going to IMDb it right now?
You keep going. Yeah, I got this.
Okay. So the profile continues on with the author being erratic, but probably not the type to follow through on any threats. According to the FBI agent, it was most likely former housekeepers or their offspring that were the culprits. I don't know why he added those 2 things together. I'm not the FBI agent. That's not what I do. But I thought that was really interesting. And despite all the suspiciousness and random information found over time, there were no concrete clues as to who it could be. It wasn't like Colonel Mustard in the library with a candlestick or something. You know what I mean? It wasn't like A plus B equals C or whatever.
You know who it might have been? James Spader, who was also in The Watcher with Keanu Reeves and Marissa Tomei.
Wow.
And Ernie Hudson, who still has fucking guns. Look at that dude.
Dang, dude.
Just saying, Winston looks good. And then just a bunch of other people in that movie. I've never seen it. I didn't even remember it came out. I didn't know James Spader and Keanu Reeves were in a movie together. But like, this happened in 2014. So that would have been 14 years, it looks like, for whoever is doing this to have been inspired by this movie.
I mean, James Spader and Keanu Reeves, it's a pretty good matchup.
You still haven't seen Stargate the movie with James Spader either.
No,
drives me nuts.
I've only watched Stargate SG-1.
Ugh,
sorry.
Whatevs.
There were no fingerprints on any of the letters or envelopes. They couldn't pinpoint a time where they could catch the Watcher in the act of mailing a letter. Police eventually ended their investigation due to lack of evidence because they had an exhaustive investigation and they couldn't find anything. Renovations were eventually completed and they included a new alarm system, but Derek just wasn't confident that that was enough to protect the property. And if someone's stalking you that intensely, I wouldn't be okay with it either. You know what I mean?
Right. If someone's sending this letter, regardless of whether or not it's a prank or they're deeply disturbed, and there's so little evidence that even the police are like, yeah, we're shutting down the investigation. Right. Like, what are you going to do at that point?
So what Derek did was he looked into guard dogs and house guards with military experience. He couldn't sleep at night, and it was starting to affect his mental state. Even Maria began seeing a therapist about post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD. People were starting to have rumors about the fact that they were going to get a divorce or something like that. This whole thing affected their lives. You know what I mean? It was absolutely horrible. The family wasn't just going to sit and let things go, though. They continued to try to figure out who it was that was sending these letters, and they tested DNA on one of the envelopes, which turned out to be female.
Wow.
So they wanted to test it against the 90-year-old Langford woman. And I think they stole a water bottle from her or something and tested the DNA and ruled her out. So it definitely wasn't her. They requested to test the Woods as well. So their DNA wasn't her. New investigation.
Should just throw a big block party at your house and collect every cup and label it with the name of every person that used it until you find who they are, and then beat the shit out of them with doorknobs stuffed in socks.
A new investigation was started in attempts to find anything that they might have missed. Interestingly enough, investigators found that there had been another family that had been targeted by the Watcher. They also received letters similar to what the Broadduses did, but tossed them out assuming that they were pranks. Upon this discovery, they performed a stakeout on the street, and at about 11 p.m. one night, they noticed a car parked near the home long enough to rouse police suspicion. And the car was tracked back to a young lady who lived in a nearby town, and that woman had a boyfriend who had an interest in quote-unquote dark video games, and whatever that means.
Dark video games? Like he didn't turn up the brightness on his screen? Like Walking Dead was a pain in the ass the first time I played it because I never turned up the brightness on.
Why not?
I don't know. I was just like, oh, like creepy ambiance. And you get to the sewer and I'm like, I can't see a goddamn thing.
This boyfriend of hers, lived on the same block as 657 Boulevard. So they're like, those guys into dark video games. I just hate the blame the video games angle. It's just so stupid.
What is considered dark video games, though? Is he playing
Silent
the horror
Hill?
genre? Is he playing Grand Theft Auto where you can like...
That's not a dark video game.
But you do dark things in that game. So it's like, it's super hard to tell like based off of that generalization of dark video games.
I'm going to say more like horror, summoning demons type thing.
You know the most murderous I've ever been playing a video game is playing Monopoly the video game because it's the same bullshit. But
Cutthroat.
A computer AI doing it to you and not someone that you can punch in the face in person. So it's just so much harder to deal with.
I kind of want to play that that game where you play a priest and you have to like exorcise people.
Exorcise the demons.
I just like watching that one dude who's like throwing.
Yeah. I don't remember what the name of that game is, but the new Blair Witch game is set to come out. I think it might be coming out Tuesday, in fact. And I'm pretty sure we promised someone on our Scary Spooky Friends group that we would get it and play it and stream it.
The last episode we recorded where we were like, we can't afford it.
I mean, we can't afford it, but at the same time, we made a promise, so we'll see what happens.
If we get to the September donation goal, then we'll get it.
She's referring to Twitch for those of you who don't know.
Yes. So you guys should watch us live, twitch.tv/garishpodcast. Anyway, that was the next word in my script here. Anyway, supposedly he was interested in a game with a character called The Watcher. Whatever, it doesn't list what game that was, which is so strange. When they requested that this boyfriend come to the station for questioning, he never showed up each time they asked. And they can't force him to come because there's no grounds to arrest him or anything, you know? In June 2015, the Broadduses sued the Woods. They sued them, the previous owners of the house.
For not letting them know.
Right. So the Broadduses claimed that the Woods received a letter themselves days before the sale of the home, but never disclosed it. The Woods then countersued for defamation, and then the Superior Court judge just ended up throwing the case out in 2018. And the judge was Camille M. Kenny, and she didn't want to make it something every seller had to disclose to buyers in the future. It was just, this is silly. This is dumb. I'm not doing this. Whatever.
There are so many games with a character named The Watcher. It's so annoying. There's a game called Dark Void, I think, that has a Watcher character. There's also The Watcher and Darksiders, which all have the word dark in it. Darksiders is definitely not a dark game, though. And then Giant Bomb as well. So, I don't know. I sincerely don't know.
I couldn't tell you. There's so many games, too, on Steam that are just, like, super indie, where they could be dark. We just have never heard of them. The Broadduses just wanted to get rid of the property in any way that they could. So they had this idea that they wanted to try, and they wanted to divide the property up into 2 different parcels and then sell the lots separately. But the neighborhood board denied their request, probably because they wanted to keep the neighborhood the way it was.
Right.
Like, it was...
HOAs, man, they're the true watchers.
Their property was almost half an acre. So it was a huge property. They could have split it up into 2. So in 2017, they attempted to rent the property out. Unfortunately for them, the rent wouldn't even cover the mortgage of the home entirely. And I think they rented it out for $5,000 a month.
Airbnb, I'm telling you. Like, sleep in the house the Watcher watches and charge a fuck ton of money for it. And it's a big house. You could have big parties there.
Who's going to go to Westfield, New Jersey?
I mean, I would if we hit 1,000 patrons. I don't know. We'll set a goal for it.
2 weeks after the renters moved in, another letter arrived. And this one was more threatening than all the other ones, and the other ones were kind of threatening. It was addressed to Derek and Maria, but it spoke of the renters. So this one went, quote, "You wonder who the Watcher is? Turn around, idiots. Maybe you even spoke to me, one of the so-called neighbors who has no idea who the Watcher could be. Or maybe you do know and are too scared to tell anyone. Good move. I walked by the news trucks when they took over my neighborhood and mocked me. I watched as you watched from the dark house in an attempt to find me. Telescopes and binoculars are wonderful inventions.
Wow.
657 Boulevard survived your attempted assault and stood strong with its army of supporters barricading its gates. My soldiers of the boulevard followed my orders to a T. They carried out their mission and saved the soul of 657 Boulevard with my orders. All hail the Watcher." And there's like a whole bunch of exclamation points.
What a douche.
Maybe a car accident, maybe a fire, maybe something as simple as a mild illness that never seems to go away, but makes you feel sick day after day after day after day after day. Maybe the mysterious death of a pet, loved ones suddenly die, planes and cars and bicycles crash, bones break, end quote.
Wow.
How fucking crazy is that?
It's just so creepy, man.
It's horrible. So dumb.
I can imagine this person writing this letter and then like their mom coming into the basement like, "Did you want some soup?" It's like, "No, Mom, go away."
So the renter you have to remember the DNA was female.
"No, Mom, go away." That's as high as I can go. I'm sorry.
So the renter, who only goes by Chris, claims to have had no clue about the letters until after he responded to the rental ad.
So shouldn't he sue them now, since they sued the people who sold them the house? Don't you have to disclose that sort of shit to a renter?
They did. They told him. He didn't find out until he responded to the ad.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to... Okay.
So his response to the whole thing was, quote, "That's not my issue," end quote. What a dickhead.
It's like, it's not up to me.
So he lived there with his 3 dogs, and maybe that's why he wasn't as worried, because he had some guard dogs around or something like that. I don't know. And I don't know how long he stayed either. But despite all this crazy stuff, the house has finally been sold as of July 2019.
Oh my God, that's so recent.
Yes. I was telling you, this is super duper duper recent. Understandably, for much less than what the Broadduses bought it for. And another
Which
couple...
is weird because property values have gone up significantly since 2014.
Yeah. So another couple bought it for a whopping $960,000. Now, even though it wasn't as much as the original family spent, I mean, they spent $1.3 million. That's a lot of flipping money. That's a lot of money.
Is that a lot of Fruit Looping money?
Flipping money. It's a lot of money, okay? $960,000, that's still a lot. But it is $400,000 less than what they bought it for.
Yeah, that's a huge chunk.
It's a
lost.
huge, yeah. That's a huge drop.
That
in
place
price.
should have been an investment, and some asshole writing letters was able to affect their lives that deeply and cut into their pocketbooks that much.
Yeah, I don't think I'd ever be able to afford a $1 million house in my lifetime.
I swear, if I ever could and then that happened to me, I'd be like, take all the shades down. I'm walking naked around this fucking house, and someone's going to stop watching sooner or later when I do backflips and cartwheels with my dingle-donger hanging out.
Oh my God. Anyway, this poor family, if you look at the history of the house and its sales history, I guess, like its property purchase price history, whatever, they bought the house in June of 2014. Then they tried to sell it for more than they bought it for, like $100K more than they bought it for. So they listed it for like $100K more than they bought it for in February of that next year. And for months, they just kept lowering the price and lowering the price until June of 2015. And then they took it off the market, only to relist it again for $100,000 less than what they bought it for.
So a $200,000 swing.
Yeah, it's insane. Then they kept lowering it, and then they tried to rent it in 2016 and 2018, only to list the house for sale again in April of 2019 for under $1 million. And they just had the worst luck trying to sell this house. They listed it at $999, and they sold it for $30,000 less than that, $40,000 less than that.
Wow.
So it's just, it must really suck. By that time, they're probably like, just take it off my hands because we can't afford this anymore.
I really wonder who bought it and how they're doing and if they're experiencing any of this nonsense.
Yeah, I can't imagine trying to sell a house to a family where you have to tell them, oh, by the way, we get threatening letters every so often. Okay, thanks, bye.
Yeah, I'd be like, so I guess you're going to have to lower the price another $40,000 then.
It's just so rough.
If I knew that and I was moving into a house and I actually committed to it, there would have to be some sort of policy of like, any letter I don't recognize is getting fucking shredded. Like, maybe this person's watching me. I'll never know. Ignorance is bliss. Whatevs. Like, I'm only
until they
opening
break into their house and murder you.
Well, I mean, they haven't done that for whatever 130 years. So, I mean, if the house has no history of murder, then it's just some voyeur watching.
Yeah.
And a family of voyeurs passing the title on of the watcher, or it's just some asshole playing a joke to see how much they can destroy someone's life.
Right.
And the worst thing you can do to someone like that is just not pay them any attention.
Yeah.
And like the thing that they did was they kept reading the fucking letters. Like as soon as I realized it was a letter from the watcher, I'd be like, nope, shred the goddamn thing. Like I don't want to know what he's saying anymore.
Well, it's not on their hands anymore. So they out. I mean, technically they moved out of Westfield before then.
Right.
But now they're really out. Like, bish, bye. They're just out. They don't have to deal with it anymore. The new buyers, it's their house. I didn't read anything about the new buyers and how they're handling the house right now, or if there's any other letters, because it is really, really, really recent.
I want to send them a letter and be like, yo, I'm not the watcher. I just want to check and see how you're doing. Here's a picture of my dog.
There hasn't been a letter since 2017, so maybe the watch has ended.
Wow.
Game of Thrones reference. It's still strange that it's still an unsolved mystery, but I just think the whole thing is absolutely mind-boggling.
It is. The idea that you buy a house that is your dream home and within 5 years you have sold that dream home while property values have steadily increased for $400,000 less than you bought it is the scariest thing about that to me.
Right.
Aside from someone stalking my children and threatening me that I won't hear them scream if I'm too far away.
Yeah.
Which is just like, you just want to get your hands on the person who would send you some shit like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel so bad for those people. Like, that's the most sympathetic I have been to someone like on the show in a long, long time.
The fact that they couldn't afford it and had to sell their other house that they were living in, the rent that they charged, these renters didn't even pay for the mortgage.
Just turn it into not just an Airbnb, turn it into a B&B. Rent out every room, hire someone to cook for people, like just lean into it super hardcore and make money off of like the watcher person. That'll definitely set them off. But if you stick to that whole, I'm just going to shred this shit, sooner or later they'll slap you with a lawsuit like, I'm the watcher, I can prove it, I didn't do anything illegal, I deserve a cut.
I got really big Amityville Horror vibes because people thought that the people in Amityville Horror were doing it for attention. And the same thing could be said about this family. They thought they're doing it for attention, but why would they put themselves so monetarily in debt?
They weren't.
No.
I'm just going to go ahead and put that out there. Like, this family didn't have anything to do with the shit that was being done to them.
Right.
$400,000 is so much money to lose over the course of 5 years.
Right.
Like, it's just heartbreaking. I can't imagine making that much money over the course of 5 years. Seriously, I can't.
Yeah.
Like, that's just, I can't imagine like, yeah, we played this prank on ourselves for media attention, which we didn't get any money for, but hey, all we're out is almost $500,000.
It's insane.
That is, that one's rough. It's
Yeah.
not as scary as the one that I did, the natural disaster
Yeah,
style
yours was
stuff.
just devastating.
But that one is just creepy as shit. Like, well, guess what happens if you survive? Other human beings are super creeps too.
Yeah.
So, wow. Good stuff.
Yeah.
All right. I got to say, that was a pretty good episode. I'm pretty proud of it. So I hope you folks enjoyed listening to it. Robin, for the folks who listen to our show that are like, man, I'd like to give them some of my money, how can they do that?
If you folks would like to support us, because we are really a donation-driven podcast, go on over to patreon.com/scarishpodcast. Those are monthly donations. We have tiers starting at $1. I post up discount codes for our Teespring store. There's physical merch tiers.
And a bunch of new products up too on our Teespring store.
Yes, we have all this new Halloween product I'm super excited about. You guys should totally check it out. Links are on our website, scarish.com. Go check it out. And then we also have coffee, ko-fi.com/scarishpodcast. Those are one-time donations. We are saving up to buy a new computer setup so we can do more streaming and things like that.
And it is coming this month, and I am so excited. I just can't hide it. Shout out to Asus Republic of Gamers laptops. You have carried us so far, so good.
Yeah,
but
if
we
you want
need
to
to get a little
sponsor
bit of
us,
backup.
please sponsor
I would
us.
love for people that I actually support to sponsor us.
Yeah,
That
like
would be
Razer.
amazing.
If Razer could sponsor us, that'd be amazing.
Let's just go down to that Razer store when it opens in Vegas and be
right.
like, I need to talk to the head of Razer. But yeah, if you folks have stories, they don't necessarily have to relate to the topics that we read, but if you have a story you'd like to share with us, please email us at storytime@scarish.com or go to our website, scarish.com, click on Contact Us, and fill out that form. Or you can hit us up on any of our social medias. Twitter is @scarishpod, Instagram is @scarishpodcast, and Facebook is facebook.com/scarishpodcast. You can join our live feedback community in our Discord by going to scarish.com. If you scroll down on the right-hand side, you'll see links to all of our social medias. That is the best way to get to the Discord. Just click it. It'll take you straight to our server. Or you can join the Scarish Spooky Friends group, which is part of our Facebook page, and just go there and post stuff. Most of it is folks posting memes and stuff that's
All the
spooky
best
related,
memes.
but they're all really, really funny. And sometimes
they're
we get...
like nice and sharp and crispy.
I hate you. Sometimes we do get inspiration, though, from some of the stuff that gets posted there for
Right.
episodes, which is what happened last week. So definitely check out our community, and we love you guys so much. You support us in ways that we never thought possible. I was checking the numbers the other day, and I was like, I just want to see how many countries have downloaded our stuff. And not a lot of countries have restrictions where you can't actually see the numbers if they've downloaded it, but some of them do. And I mentioned that because we've been listened to in over 100 countries in the world, and I never thought I would do something that was appreciated on that scale, and it means so much to me. So sincerely, from the bottom of my heart, wherever you're listening, I thank you so much. Whether or not we've ever heard from you, if you're one of our ghost listeners, we love you so much.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you.
But I think that's just about everything we have. We hope you enjoyed this episode. And Robin, go ahead and sign us out.
Keep on creeping on, and we'll talk to you guys later.